What about the labor movement? The United States has an unusually violent labor history by comparative standards. So workers are being murdered here into the 1930s. This is something that was unheard of in Europe or Australia. In fact, right-wing British newspapers like the London Times in the 1920s were reporting back and just appalled at the treatment of American workers. You just don't do that, you know. And in fact, the American labor movement, which was very vibrant and lively, was practically dead by the 1920s. It was killed off by the Wilson Red Scares. So it was almost dead. There's a great book on labor history by David Montgomery, one of the great labor historians, died recently. It's called something like The Fall of American Labor. And he's talking about the 1920s. Had been a very lively labor movement. It was destroyed. By 1920s, there was almost nothing there. It came back. In the 1930s, it came back. CIO organizing started. I'm old enough to remember this. My unemployed working class family was part of it. That was the cutting edge of the New Deal legislation. And it got very far. By the time it got to sit-down strikes in enterprises, it really put the real fear in the hearts of the business classes. A sit-down strike is just one step before taking over the factory and saying, goodbye, we don't need you, we'll run it ourselves. So at that point, you start getting the New Deal legislation, which was very significant, shouldn't be, but designed to prevent the labor movement from going any farther. Important, I'm not denigrating it, I'm glad it happened. But it was intended to contain as well as support working people. You had a very powerful labor movement. And by the late 1930s, incidentally, if you read the business press in those years, you get the same paranoia. The world's coming to an end. But they did start to organize the business world, other devices for controlling labor, what were called scientific methods of strike breaking. They were kind of worked out and began to be applied in the 1930s. It's kind of interesting to look at them. Everything was on hold during the Second World War, of course, but immediately after the Second World War, it started instantly. Taft-Hartley Act, set 1947, huge propaganda campaigns by the business world to indoctrinate workers, forced sessions in factories, efforts to take over schools, sports leagues, and nothing was left out. There's interesting literature on this if you want to read it. It's just an amazing propaganda campaign. Make people hate government, but nevertheless want a big government for us, and hate taxes, the whole business. And it's had a big effect. It took off again. It escalated in the 1970s, and we're living in the middle of it today. But it's not the first time in American history. It's happened before. The 1920s were a case in point, and it can come back. So in answer to your question, if in the 1920s you could have well predicted we'll never have a labor movement. Turned out to be radically incorrect, and it could be incorrect now. Depends what people do.